Yes, they came to the Parents' Day visitations, but they were always the first to leave, and eager to do it. Especially her father, the man Della had spent her entire life trying to impress. A daddy's girl, her mom used to call her. Not anymore. No doubt her sister had taken over that role. Turning vampire hadn't been Della's choice. It was one of those things life slapped on your ass and you just had to accept it. Which meant she'd had to accept that her family would never be able to accept her. Not that it really bothered her. Not anymore. She was so over it. "Am I making myself clear?" Burnett asked, yanking her back to reality. 100%, Della said, working hard to keep her attitude from spilling over. "Yes, sir," Steve nodded. "Yep, an ass kisser." "Okay, you got your orders?" Burnett said. "You know where to go and what your cover is? They expect you to meet them at 4 in the morning. Don't be late, don't be too early. Don't let them lure you back to their compound. The policy, if they follow their own policy, is that 3 of the members will meet with you to talk. You get the information about joining, you get out." "Got it." Della held up the brown envelope. "And you've gone over this 10 times. "Then go get your things." Burnett eyed Della. "And please, don't make me regret sending you on this." "You won't," Della said. Della and Steve stood to leave. "Steve," Burnett said, "give me a few minutes." Della looked from Steve to Burnett. What the hell did he need to talk with Steve about that couldn't be said in front of her? Burnett shifted his gaze to Della and then cut his eyes to the door. Frowning, Della shot up from the chair and left. She stepped about 50 feet from the porch, holding her breath and not moving a muscle. Hoping Burnett wasn't still listening, she tuned her own vampire hearing and waited to discover what the hell was up. The afternoon sun spilled over the trees, casting shadows on the ground as she stood frozen in one spot. "I'm trusting you to keep Della safe," Burnett said. Della inwardly growled at Burnett's chauvinistic approach and fought the need to rush back in there and give him some lip. "I'm the one who's going to have to protect his butt." "I do not believe this is the gang we're looking for." Burnett's voice carried well, "or I wouldn't be sending you to. This is just a clearance check. But that doesn't mean this group isn't dangerous." "Don't worry," Steve's deep voice answered. "I'll keep her in my sight at all times." "Like hell you will." She already had a plan of doing a little side trip, and she didn't need Steve tagging along. At 6 that evening, they arrived at the cabin the FRU had rented them right outside the vampire compound. To call the place a dump would have been like calling one of those roach coach vans fine dining. Of course, she and Steve were supposed to look like a couple of supernatural teen runaways. She supposed it would have looked suspicious if they'd rented anything with even part of a star attached to its reputation. But damn, this was supposed to have been a fun trip. She wasn't a prima donna, but sleeping on a mattress that was more dust mites than filling, with sheets that looked as if they hadn't been changed in a year or so, wasn't her idea of fun. The bed's covers were half on and half off the mattress, and the pillow sported an indented, greasy spot in the center as if someone with not-so-clean hair had slept there. Or maybe died there. As disgusting as that thought was, one even worse hit. Someone had probably done the Humpty dance on that bed. Yuck. She could probably get a disease sleeping on it. Walking back into the tiny living area, she found Steve staring at the sofa with about as much distaste as she had while gaping at the bed. "Come to think about it, I'll take the sofa," she said, "and I don't want to hear any shit. There ain't no one going to get past me." They had flown here. Not on a jet. Him as a peregrine falcon, which meant he was fast, and her as a vampire, which meant she was faster. Vamps and shapeshifters were the only 2 species who could really fly. Well, an occasional witch, but Miranda, her Wiccan roommate, swore they really didn't travel around on brooms. However, Steve and Della's mode of transportation also meant they really hadn't spoken since they'd left Shadow Falls, with the exception of when they'd first walked into the cabin, and he'd insisted she take the bed. And why? Because if someone came through the door, he would stop them? That downright pissed her off. She almost called him on being a complete chauvinistic pig, but then realized that if she wanted to sneak out later, she wouldn't want him traipsing into the living room before morning and finding her gone. Since he came across as the type with manners and morals and stuff, who wouldn't come into a girl's bedroom, at least not without an invitation,